Okay, Finn, tell us about yourself.
I am Finn Longman. I'm the author of The Butterfly Assassin, and I am also a medievalist, and I research medieval Irish literature. I originally wrote The Butterfly Assassin when I was 18, and it was published when I was 26. I wrote my first novel at 13, kind of, just to prove that I could. I was online and people were like, oh, you can't write a novel when you're 13, you can't write a novel in a month, you can't write a novel. And I was just like, I'm going to prove all of yous wrong. Wrote my first novel in 2 weeks. Carried on writing throughout my teens. It was a sort of a coping mechanism a lot of the time. It was just how I processed things. Finally, when I was 23, I was accepted for a mentorship program, and I was working with Rory Power, who's the author of Wilder Girls. I don't know if it was necessarily her feedback that improved the book massively, or just the fact that having her there gave me the courage to just burn the book down and start over. This is a trilogy of young adult thrillers about a traumatized teenage assassin called Isabel, who is trying and failing to live a normal life in a fictional closed city in Yorkshire called Espera. And when I say she's failing, I mean she killed someone in chapter 1 of book 1. The city of Espera was founded during World War I for weapons development, but has kind of gradually become controlled by these two guilds of assassins and armed stealers. And Isabel was raised by one of these guilds and has got tangled up in them, and they won't let her leave. It is substantially a critique of the arms industry and the military recruitment of teenagers, which is something that makes me really angry. So there's a lot of real-world rage in this series through the metaphor of assassins. I think it's a little unusual as a young adult trilogy, particularly one aimed at older young adult readers, because there is no romance anywhere in the trilogy, and there is a big emphasis on friendship and on platonic relationships as being the most intense and the most important relationships in the characters' lives. When I was a teenager, I was very sick of every single book being very romance heavy. So I knew that I wanted to write a book that was as dark and like morally complex as these upper YA books, but that was about friendship, because it seemed like everyone treated friendship as something you grew out of, that you could only have that if you read books for 10-year-olds. The protagonist of this series is objectively a terrible person. She kills a lot of people. It's also very much looking into issues of justice and culpability and forgiveness.
What is the connection to Leeds to the book series?
So the first two books are set in the closed city of Espera, which is somewhere between York and Scarborough. We have a map actually inside the book, which is fun. And the borough names are based on villages in the area. Leeds being kind of the nearest big city to Espera is where a lot of the action starts to take place. Isabel flees Espera and winds up in Leeds and spends several months here, gradually healing from the events of book 2, which was a bloodbath, coming to some conclusions about how her city has been treated and the part she wants to play in changing that, and what she can do to help the people who are still stuck inside the city. So we've got kind of your classic dystopian development of starting out going, oh, I'm trapped in this system that's terrible, and ending up in the, okay, we got to dismantle the system. We have several scenes in Leeds Central Library, from kind of the entrance hall into the general fiction section, into the local history section, and in the cafe, because it's just so beautiful in there. Libraries are a kind of running theme throughout the trilogy. In the first book, we see quite a few scenes in Isabel's school library in Espera. In the second book, she gets a part-time job in a library and discovers all the other librarians are, in fact, revolutionaries. And then in book 3, we come to Leeds Central Library, and to come to a building like this that is the first beautiful thing she's seen since she arrived, because she has been very closed off. To see the colours of this building and the beauty of the building, and it's a beauty that is built to last, and it's a beauty that has history and weight behind it, is very powerful for her. A library assistant took me on a behind-the-scenes tour and brought me to the local history room, which was when I realised I could have some really effective moments there, actually. That directly inspired a scene, and I went back and rewrote that part of the book. My most important piece of advice when it comes to writing is not to be afraid to do it wrong. Every book I ever wrote correctly, I wrote wrong about 6 times first. And I didn't study creative writing. I learned to write by just doing it. The worst book you can write on paper is still better than an amazing book that's only in your head. A prompt I find really useful when you're a bit stuck or you don't know where to start is to grab a piece of music. It doesn't have to be classical music, but I find that works quite well, both because the pieces are long and because orchestral music, like, it can be very evocative. And for the duration of that music, just free write, just writing stream of consciousness, the pictures that music is evoking in your head, the ideas it's evoking, the emotion, and at the end of it, you've written something it's got you through the block. Sometimes it can spark a new story idea, sometimes it can give you a missing scene for a story you're already writing. So this is one of my favourite warm-up exercises, and the only one I ever learned from a creative writing class. I find a lot of people, they start writing a book, or they start writing a story, and then they get stuck partway through. There's no tension, there's no real sense of who the antagonist is, or who the villain is. There's no true understanding of why can't the protagonist have what they want. A really useful exercise is to plot the story from the point of view of somebody else. Now, sometimes it's really helpful to plot the book from the point of view of the bad guy. What are they trying to achieve? What do they actually want? What are they doing in the background whenever we can't see them? And how does that intersect with the protagonist? A good way to practice doing that is to take a story that you already know and think about another character's point of view. What do they think is happening? What genre are they living in? What plot are they enacting? It doesn't have to be the bad guy. It could just be the main character's best friend who doesn't actually know what's going on. I find this a really interesting way to take a step back from the story and figure it out from a different angle, and it nearly always solves my plot problems. Chapter 1. Erraro. Mistake. That first night in her tiny flat, she cuts off her hair and her name. The brown strands are easily binned, but Isabel Ryan's is harder to get rid of. When she looks in the mirror, that's who she sees, despite the asymmetrical crop of hair that half obscures her face. Not Bella Nichols, the name on her new papers, her school records, the bank account with barely enough stolen money to cover next month's rent. Isabel can't hide from herself. Which means she can't hide from them, either. She keeps trying anyway. Every night she triple-checks her locks and wedges a chair underneath the door handle, because if it won't stop them, at least it'll give her prior warning when, they come for her. Each undisturbed night is both relief and agony, and she spends her days waiting for it all to fall apart. They know she's here. They must know she's here. Nobody can hide from the guilds. They're too good at what they do. The fact she's still alive just means they're biding their time. After 2 sleepless nights, Isabel starts keeping a knife under her pillow. After 3, she abandons her bed for the battered settee where she has an unobstructed view of the door. She wakes every morning with a crick in her neck that nothing can entirely ease, unable to shake off her fear. I got out, she tells herself. But is that even true, when she can't bring herself to sleep in her own bed? This is nothing but a temporary reprieve, a moment's breath before things get 100 times worse. She shouldn't have left. She's going to spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder.